I'm Nate Beck, and I own a local wiener cart called Natedogs. You may or may not have seen my orange, bright orange cart at many beer festivals or tap rooms here in the Twin Cities. I tend to move around quite a bit, so I try to keep a pretty varied schedule with where I bring my cart. But today we're working with Summit Brewing and their Frost Line Rye in making one of the mustards that I always scratch make for my cart. I make all of my condiments from scratch for my cart, and what I have become somewhat known for are my mustards, especially my beer mustards made with local Minnesota craft beers. And so in this case, we're making this nice mustard over here out of the Frost Line Rye to be able to use at Summit's tap room coming up in the next week. We're trying to utilize in this mustard, with the fact that this has a rye component to the beer, we added in some toasted as well as untoasted caraway seeds to kind of give it that characteristic rye bread flavor and aroma, but it also adds a nice earthiness, kind of a nice malty breadiness to the beer, and goes, I think, very, very nicely with the hop component to this particular beer. And then we're going to round it out with a little bit of honey and a little bit of molasses to add just a touch of sweetness without taking away from the hop component in the beer, as well as the heat and the mustard. And so the idea is, with a beer mustard made with a beer like this, is you want to try to use as cold a beer as possible to keep that mustard as hot as possible, because you really want to get that heat component to the mustard to counteract, especially in what I do, to counteract that fatty richness of the all-natural, locally raised pork that I use in my wieners and brats. I think that in making condiments, or in cooking in general, and I think this is the case in brewing very high quality craft beer, we could say, since that's the kind of the common phrase, is to use as few ingredients as possible to try to really bring out the natural characteristics of all the ingredients that you're working with. So when I make mustard, when I came up with this recipe for my basic beer mustard, was to try to utilize as few ingredients as possible so that you literally let the main ingredients of your recipe shine forth. So I try to tailor the mixture of brown versus yellow mustard seed to the type of beer that I'm using. Very heavily hopped beers tend to pair more effectively with a predominantly yellow mustard seed, because it has more of an astringent, kind of bitter biting quality to it that pairs really well with kind of the assertive hops. And if something is a little bit maltier, I tend to use a more predominantly brown or black mustard seed component, because it has a kind of a richer, slightly sweeter, nuttier flavor than the yellow mustard seeds do. So in this case, we're using probably 2/3 brown mustard seed to 1/3 yellow mustard seed. And then it's literally just beer, salt, sweetener, and a spice, and that's it. Oh, and a little bit of vinegar. The acid in a mustard helps to, one, preserve it, as well as lock in the heat that we've worked hard to get with using this really nice cold beer. So now that we've got this delicious mustard that we're making with the Frost Line Rye, come on out and see me on January 31st. It's a Friday night from 4 to 9 at the Summit Beer Hall, and come and try this delicious mustard on top of one of my quality wieners or brats. We'd love to see you. Cheers.